Hey, it's Mike here, and today the American Heart Association has gone and ranked a bunch of popular diets, and it looks like a vegan isn't super high up there where I believe it should be, which we'll get into, but at least a keto diet was dead last. That makes me feel better, okay. But also frustratingly, they had another category that included a bunch of healthier plant-based diets. We're talking Ornish style, Esselstyn style, even Neil Barnard style, and they scored quite poorly based off reasons that I think are not valid at all. We're going to cover them. And some of you may have seen my US News and World Report diet ranking response video. I had a lot of fun with that one. So let's just rank some ranking here and go. Firstly, what sets this one apart from other rankings is that it has to do with heart disease, how well a diet is going to help somebody prevent heart disease, our leading killer. And that's because it's done by the American Heart Association. But we need to remember that, this isn't a wing of the government. We're talking about a non-profit organization that's been around since the 20s. Well, I'm not sure to what degree there is an outright anti-vegan agenda going on here. It is worth remembering that the American Heart Association has had long-standing ties to the meat industry. For over a decade, they've been partnered with, beef organizations, and they have even put heart healthy labels on meat, including ground beef, which is a class 1A carcinogen, as you know. But that's cancer, that's not heart disease. But that connection should be an aha moment right there. Kaboom, crappy pun number one. And that was an aha moment for an organization that actually filed a lawsuit in 2022 challenging these labels. Interesting to follow that. But I do have to say they seem to be an internally conflicted organization, because they will in certain reports say, hey, reduce meat consumption to decrease heart disease risk, but then they flip-flop. And it is the case, though, in this ranking report that they are ranking less meat higher, so that is cool. However, with their partnerships and probably where they're getting some money from, it's unlikely that they'll ever fully be able to see the truth with regard to diet and heart disease risk. But let's just get to that report, which came out about a week ago. It's this one right here. AHA scientific statement. Now, what diets did they include? Well, their criteria, which I think is logical, are ones that can be done and are designed to be done longer term, because this is a chronic condition, and so that is completely relevant. And so they're throwing out things like Weight Watchers or overnight weight loss diets. And the result is that they included, 10 diets, which are still categories in some cases. For example, one category does include those, lower fat, usually vegan diets such as Esselstyn, Ornish, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, McDougall, which they spelled wrong. They forgot an L, and that itself is an L. And where they put those really stabs me directly in the heart. Anyway, how did they actually rank these? Well, they didn't ask the question, which one has the most research about lowering the risk of actually dying of heart disease? No, instead they made it a little bit more convoluted with a bunch of different categories that they ranked in. They were looking at how much certain dietary patterns align with their recently published American Heart Association criteria, which does involve things like cultural factors that affect long-term adherence. And that has to do with adherence to their 2021 dietary guidelines that they made. And that has 10 points that they're being ranked on, which include things like, does it have vegetables in it? Whole grains? Is the protein coming from a healthy source? Which has 4 different breakdowns beyond that and a bunch of other categories. But at this point, you're probably just wondering, what are the winning diets? How did they actually rank these? Let's just get right to this chart right here, which breaks them up not just from best to worst, but also tiers. Starting with the first tier, we have a DASH style diet, which includes a Nordic diet. Number 2, we have a Mediterranean. Number 3 is a pescatarian, lacto-ovo-vegetarian. And then we go into the second tier, vegan, greater than 10% fat, so sort of standard vegan. And then volumetrics at number 6, which is sort of like a high soup diet to make you eat less. And then third tier is the very low fat, often vegan diet, and also low carb. And then fourth tier, the worst, is paleo with keto at the very last. Before we get to the negative, let's focus on the positive here. First of all, they're putting mostly plant-based diets at the top, which is awesome. They're not flipping the script and putting keto up there. Keto's at the bottom. Once again, happy about that. And if you're wondering why I'm happy about that, meta-analysis over and over again shows about a 30% increased risk of all-cause mortality with these low-carb diets. And yeah, once again, they are looking for vegetables and whole grains in the diet. And then in terms of protein, one of the healthy factors for that is, quote, mostly from plants, in parentheses, legumes and nuts, which is cool. But I will say this chart is a bit confusing. It has a bunch of squares and colors, so let's break those down so you can read it more easily. So you have your category on the left for healthy, then you have your diets on the top, and then color codes for what fraction of a point they got, with red as 0 and green as 1. So, no surprise that a keto diet would get a 0 for whole grains. No carbs. And we can learn about this ranking system and simultaneously gloat about how bad a keto diet did here, looking down the line. Obviously, fruits and veggies, nope. Whole grains, nope. Healthy protein sources, nope. They also looked at tropical oils, considering, of course, that palm oil and stuff can increase LDL. Well, people love to pound that on a keto diet, so that got a nope. Not great on salt. No alcohol, which is good, but honestly, I think separate from diet. And they got a half score on processed foods. And finally, they got a 0 on adherence, which I think is interesting because they're talking specifically about how easily it would be to adhere if you're going out to restaurants. They say, quote, adherence to guidelines regardless of where foods are prepared or consumed affects the evolution of eating behavior in the United States and acknowledges that many people consume more than 1/3 of calories outside the home. Yes, they just eat on their front lawn, which is why vegan is so efficient. Mow your grass and you've got dinner. Obviously, I'm joking, but now you get an idea of why things were ranked how they were. And today's video is sponsored by Seeds DS01 Daily Synbiotic, which includes prebiotics and probiotics. And they have an unprecedented deal for you guys today at 40% off your first month's supply. For those that don't know, we're talking about 53.6 billion active bacteria cell units in each one of these guys. And that is from 24 different strains, which are scientifically shown to support gut immunity and barrier health, as well as overall digestive health and skin health and heart health and more. And today's theme is springtime over here at Seed. So today we're gonna look at information on 3 good spring foods that help the gut. First of all, we have strawberries, one of my favorite. They actually have some benzoic polyphenols, which undergo metabolism by colonic bacteria after ingestion, resulting in some beneficial metabolites. Next, we have asparagus, which I love and I have been downing a lot of. They're particularly high in insoluble fiber to help with those bowel movements. Artichokes, literally one of my favorite foods. Here's a randomized control trial showing that the inulin, which is a prebiotic from artichokes, boosts gut bacteria, which is awesome. So you can down good foods like that and also take Seeds DS01 Daily Synbiotic to have enough good bacteria to do what needs to be done to that food inside you. And Lindy and I have been taking Seeds since 2001, and Lindy is obsessed. And don't forget about that insane 40% off for your first month supply, which you can get by using the code Mike at checkout with the link below. All right. And we have to look at Dash and why it won. And I really want to compare that specifically to a vegan diet. Also looking at, Mediterranean and Lacto-Ovo, which beat a vegan diet, which kills me. One area that might be a little unfair is looking at the tropical oils. Yeah, it's true that a vegan diet doesn't try to limit these. I think they should be trying to limit them, which is why I advocate for other types of vegan diets for people that are trying to eat more healthy. But the Dash diet, which does say limit tropical oils, doesn't say no tropical oils, yet they still got full points on that one. Biased. Another one that annoys me is that they gave Dash a perfect score for going out to eat at restaurants, and then they gave a vegan diet the worst score, which just shows that people have not actually tried to eat out as a vegan. I mean, you can eat vegan at Taco Bell and so many of these restaurants that are everywhere. It doesn't mean it's the healthiest, but then, a Dash diet, somebody trying to eat that, like they're actually going to be eating low sodium when all of the restaurant food is just totally injected with like 3,000 milligrams of sodium per meal. But again, perfect score. I would say you can pretend to be on a Dash diet while you're eating at restaurants. That would be perfect score. But when we're looking at Dash and Mediterranean and pescatarian and vegetarian, which all beat a vegan diet, we really have to look at this through the lens of actual heart disease death risk, looking at things like biomarkers, for example, the main one, LDL or bad cholesterol, which so much research now shows is causal to atherosclerosis when LDL is high. Vegans have the lowest LDL here, averaging around 70, oftentimes as low as 50. pescatarians are higher, vegetarians are higher, but then looking to a study like this on atherosclerosis progression, you can really see that vegans are where you want to be here, in terms of how many atherosclerotic lesions there are in your arteries. So it's crazy that a vegetarian diet, which is often, built around consuming saturated animal fat from dairy products, did better here than a vegan diet that has no saturated animal fat, and then got points knocked off because of some coconut oil, which from this study increases LDL to a lesser extent than butter does. So really not a one-to-one here. And also there's nothing about a vegetarian diet that is stopping people from eating tropical oils. So again, I don't know why they scored better there. And while looking at LDL, we have to wonder, what do Mediterranean dieters have in terms of LDL levels? Well, we can look to, our traditional Sardinians going back to the 70s, and man, their LDL was still averaging up like 135, which is insanely high, but not as high as mainland Italy. And we do have an interesting 2022 study from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology that compared these diets, quite perfectly in terms of having, Mediterranean and DASH diet and a vegan diet. It wasn't a huge study, but the results are quite interesting in that a vegan diet destroyed in terms of cholesterol reduction with, 30-point total drop, about 20-point drop from LDL cholesterol alone. The LDL essentially didn't even drop on people who were put on a Mediterranean diet, which, in terms of the context of putting modern people on that diet, like what results are you going to get? So vegan diet beat the DASH diet there, and then a vegan diet also lost more weight than the DASH diet. And then, even though it wasn't statistically significant due to the size, the vegans trended actually a better improvement in blood pressure than the DASH diet, by about 50%. And that's like the whole point of the DASH diet and why it was created, to, lower sodium and lower hypertension. And that's right in line with vegans having super low levels of that high blood pressure or hypertension in studies comparing them to other diets over and over again, Adventist or Epic Oxford. Here's the crazy thing. You look at the vegan column and think, take the tropical oils out, take the salt out, take the processed foods out, and a vegan diet would kill it. Well, that's kind of the next category, which does worse. All right, now this is where I'm getting frustrated. Because the low-fat diet, less than 10% of fat diet, which it says, often vegan, including, Esselstyn here, and, the virtually all plant-based Ornish diet, I believe he's now converted to fully vegan, advocating for that. And also McDougall and PCRM, which is Neil Bernard. We're talking about diets that are more or less whole food, plant-based. That's what they're called. And even under that category, they didn't give them full score on dodging processed food. So they clearly didn't even do the research here. But I was happy to see these diets even mentioned here. They could have just ignored them altogether. But it is just so frustrating to see a lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet that is just loaded with saturated animal fat beat out diets that are specifically designed to fight heart disease in people with severe cardiovascular disease. I mean, looking to Ornish's studies, like this randomized control trial, by the end of it, the people on his plant-based intervention had 2.5 times lower cardiac events than the control group, which is insane. And you're not going to get that result for these other diets. Ornish's diet, for heart disease is covered by Medicaid and Aetna. I don't think that's the same for just a vegetarian diet, which outperformed it, or, a pescatarian diet. And of course, we have Dr. Esselstyn's diet that put about 200 people on a whole food vegan diet. And of the 177 that stuck with it, they stopped heart disease in their tracks. They essentially had 0 cardiac events compared to people who failed that had, 60% rate of adverse events. It's not a randomized control trial, but shocking data nonetheless. Now, biggest slap in the face, a score of 0. We're talking points off for Esselstyn and Ornish for use vegetable oils instead of tropic oils. Did they give points off for just not including vegetable oil? Kind of weird, because it can't be for using tropical oils. Wackadoodle here. And it's also annoying to see adherence points knocked off. Yeah, you're not going to be able to eat at a restaurant, but Dr. Esselstyn achieved about a 90% adherence rate over 12 years in that study, which is nuts. They also went after B12 with vegan diets, and not only does Esselstyn's study in his diet recommendations specifically state that you should take B12, but more recent studies over and over and over again are showing no difference in B12 deficiency rates for vegans and people that eat meat, just based off proper supplementation and fortifying foods. And finally, it's just no surprise that those low-carb diets did so bad. I mean, why are paleo people, in addition to being obsessed with all these animal foods and animal fats, still even deciding to guzzle down coconut oil as their one oil of choice? I mean, in paleo times 50,000 years ago, we didn't even have coconut oil. I don't understand it. I digress. In the end, though, this was bittersweet because I did get to see those low-carb diets once again get snubbed of all of their health claims and, where they should be, because they are definitely doing damage. But then, again, bittersweet because vegan diet, middle of the pack, which, based off the biomarkers that we're seeing and all of these other studies, especially on these whole food vegan diets, this was just an atrocious placement for them. And finally, I do feel like there were weird contradictions in the ranking just so that they could put the diets where they wanted to put them, probably based off their preconceived notions. Like, I kind of feel like they just wrote the list and then did the grid after that. That's the sort of vibe I get. And who knows if there was any influence, like, don't put the vegan diet up there, otherwise, we're going to take away our beef funding, American Heart Association. I don't know if any of that was going on. At this point, I almost expected to, but no direct evidence from this report. Anyway, if you are interested in seed, you can once again click my link below and use the code Mike for now 40% off your first month's supply of Seeds DS01 Daily Symbiotic. And of course, let me know down below if there are any details from this paper that I missed. I know some of you looked at it already. And of course, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.